This is the first PowerPoint on exchange rates. What does it mean to you, the consumer, when a currency is worth more or less, when it's stronger or weaker? So let's look at what happened back in 2014 and 15. So on November 18th, 2014, the Canadian dollar was worth almost 88 cents US. So if you wanted to look at what a holiday in the States would cost you, if it was US 5,000, let's see what it would cost you in Canadian dollars. Now, you may not want to set up all of these calculations, but I need to see, at least initially, how it plays out. So I'm going to look at it in terms of ratios. First of all, we have 1 Canadian dollar equals 88 cents US. So you see that on the two numerators. Then we're trying to find out X, which is the amount in Canadian dollars the holiday will cost you, and relative to the US cost of $5,000. So then you cross multiply and isolate X, and you find that in 2014 it would have cost just under $5,700. But as we know, the Canadian dollar has been falling vis-a-vis the American dollar. And so by the following year, August 10th, 2015, the Canadian dollar had depreciated, so it's worth less. It had fallen and was now trading at only 76 cents US. So $1 Canadian would buy you now 76 cents US instead of before, when $1 Canadian would buy you 88 cents US. That same holiday would now cost you, so you could get to a faster calculation of taking the amount in US dollars and dividing it by that exchange rate, and it's almost $6,600. So foreign travel and likewise imports are much more expensive if your currency falls in value. Let's use the same scenario and look at exports when a currency declines in value. So imagine that you're exporting goods worth $10,000 Canadian to the US. Again, using the same numbers, in November 2014, that would cost the US importer almost $8,800 US. Again, looking at the ratios, $1 Canadian is 88 cents US. We know that we have a value of 10,000 Canadian in goods, and we're trying to find out what that equivalent would be in Y. Cross-multiplying and isolating Y gives you the number. In August 2015, that same amount of exports from Canada, because the Canadian dollar had fallen or depreciated, would cost the American importer just $7,600. So that's more than $1,000 saving. So Canadian exports became cheaper for foreign countries to buy when the currency is worth less. So hence, when a currency falls in value or depreciates, foreign travel is more expensive. So we know that from what we've been experiencing lately in Canada. It's more expensive to go to Europe and to the States. Imports are more expensive. They've been talking in the news about how we're going to have to raise the price at retail stores, and if food is imported, raise the price at restaurants, and so on, because the imports are more expensive. We know as a plus that exports become cheaper for the foreign countries. And if you are a multinational and you have foreign companies operating abroad and you're bringing back your profits or repatriating your profits, they're going to be worth more in your own currency. Increases in value and appreciation of the currency means that foreign travel is cheaper, imports are cheaper. On the downside, exports become more expensive for foreign countries because they have to exchange more of their currency to get your currency to pay for the goods. And if you have foreign companies operating abroad, any profits brought home or repatriated are worth less now in your own currency. The exchange rate. National currencies can be traded or exchanged for each other in the foreign exchange market. So we're going to do a little activity in class, or we've probably done that before we've reached this PowerPoint, where we're going to assume that there is a foreign exchange market which is completely separate from any other country. We're going to put it maybe in the middle of the ocean. And as you demand more foreign currency, or you are exchanging your currency for other currencies, the supply and demand within that foreign exchange market is going to change. And so a currency will either appreciate or depreciate. So I want you to mainly think of the foreign exchange market as being a distinct market in and of itself, completely separate from all countries, and what happens there will determine the value of the currency. The rate at which it can be exchanged is called the exchange rate. And also, one currency is always expressed in terms of another currency. And it's expressed as the amount of currency that can buy 1 unit of the other currency. And you'll see that in next example. So we're looking at 1 Canadian dollar did equal, 76 cents US on August 10th, 2015. So we're looking at the value of 1 unit of the currency. What will that get you? Where do these exchanges take place? They take place in a market called the Forex market, so the foreign exchange market. This is a bit of a dated slide, the information as of 2013, but daily they were trading $5.3 trillion. So a hypothetical exchange rate. The number of dollars per euro will hypothetically say that for 1 euro, so for 1 unit, we'll have $1.5. And the number of euros per dollar, so for $1, you would get 0.67 euros. The two expressions are exactly equivalent. Now, why might that be? So if we said that $1.5 equaled 1 euro, if we wanted to isolate this to be just $1, we would have to divide this by 1.5. And if we divide one side by 1.5, we have to divide the other. This would cross through and we'd be left with $1 would equal 0.67 euros. So the two exchange rates are equivalent. So we're going to look at in a floating or a flexible exchange rate system. So the exchange rate we can think of as being the price of a currency. In a floating exchange rate system, also known as a flexible exchange rate system, exchange rates are determined entirely by market forces, or in other words, supply and demand. In a floating or flexible exchange rate system, there is no government intervention in the foreign exchange market to influence the value of currencies. And remember, the price of one currency must always be expressed in terms of another currency. You cannot have an exchange rate in isolation. So the market for US dollars. Watch how the labels are, how the axes are labeled, pardon me. So we'd have quantity of dollars, that's quite simple. But then, again, it has to be in comparison to another currency. We say euros per dollar, or we say the price of dollars in terms of euro. And I'm going to explain why in a couple of slides from now. But watch the terminology because you could get hit for losing marks if you're not precise. So the market for euros, we would have quantity of euros. And then again on this axis, one way of thinking of it is if you're tracking euros, this is not going to be the first thing you see. It's going to be the other currency. So it's going to be dollars per euro, or the price of euro in terms of dollars, however you like to refer to it. I generally use this expression. So why might Eurozone citizens want US dollars? Well, they might want to travel to the US. They might want to buy US goods. They might want to put their money in a US bank account. They might want to buy a US business. Or they might think that the US dollar will appreciate, so be worth more in the future. So what citizens might do is to buy the US dollar now, hoping that it's going to appreciate, and then sell the US dollars when they're worth more. And this is known as speculation. And I'll just put etc. There could be other reasons as well. So the demand for dollars from Eurozone residents might be for carrying out transactions in the US, such as we said, Eurozone importers buying goods from the US, investors who want to invest in the US, whether that's stocks, bonds, money in the bank account, setting up businesses, or going on holiday, etc. So, some terminology: exchange rate changes, appreciation and depreciation. The value of the dollar, in this case in terms of the euro, will increase if there's an increase in the demand for dollars. So I just want to go back to micro. If there's an increase in the demand for a product, you know that the product's price will increase. Well, in the case of currency, if there's an increase in the demand for that currency, it will appreciate. So the demand for the dollar's curve shifts to the right. Or if there's a decrease in the supply of dollars, in which case the supply of dollars curve shifts to the left. But again, you know this from micro. If there's a decrease in supply of a particular good that you're tracking, you know that the price will increase. So in this case, we have a decrease in supply of currency as opposed to a good that you can consume. So if we have a decrease in supply, you know from micro that the price will go up. And so in the case of a currency, we say that it appreciates. An increase in the value of a currency in a floating exchange rate system is called appreciation. So note, it has to be in the floating exchange rate system to use that terminology. In other exchange rate systems, it will be called something else. So watch that you're precise. So US dollar appreciation. If we had an increase in demand, so we're going from D1 to D2, we can see that the euro per dollar, we're tracking dollars, has increased from 0.67 to 0.9. And we will talk about why this axis has been labeled this in a few slides. Well, actually, I'll mention it now. If the dollar was to be worth more, would you expect you to be able to have more euros for that? And the answer is yes. So before the appreciation, $1 was worth 67 euros, so hence the euros per $1. And after the appreciation, when the dollar is worth more, $1 will now get you 0.9 euros. So you can see how it's worth more vis-a-vis or relative to the euro. Oh, and this is just what I went through. Why does the y-axis saying this make sense if the US dollar is appreciating? And so if it's worth more, you would expect it to trade for more euros, not fewer. Depreciation. So I'm just going to jump again. If you're dealing with a floating exchange rate system and the currency becomes worth less, we use the term depreciation, but it has to be in a floating exchange rate system. So just like with micro, if demand for a product falls, the price will fall. So the value of the dollar will fall if there's a decrease in the demand for the dollar, causing a leftward shift in the demand for dollars curve. We also know from micro that if there's an increase in supply of a product and the supply curve shifts right, again, the price or value of the product will go down. Well, just like with currencies, if there's an increase in the supply of dollars, causing a rightward shift in the supply of dollars curve, it will depreciate. So scenario, because of a change in consumer tastes, Eurozone consumers would like to import more US goods. So we can look at what's happening both with the US dollars and the euro depreciation. So first of all, in terms of this textbook theory, if you want to import more US dollars, the Europeans are going to have to exchange their euros in the foreign exchange market and buy more US currency. Once they have the US currency, they can then buy the US goods. So if we looked at this foreign exchange market, imagining it's out in the middle of the sea, of course it's not, but what is happening actually in that foreign exchange market? Well, first of all, there's going to be an increase in demand for US dollars. The increase in demand at that market because the Europeans are bringing their euros, plunking their currency down at the foreign exchange market, and demanding the US dollars in order to buy the US goods. Demand increases, the US currency appreciates. We could also look at what's happening in terms of when the Europeans bring over their euros, again, to the foreign exchange market and what's happening there. They're increasing the supply of euros within the foreign exchange market because they're bringing their euros, plunking them down, leaving them there so that they can then exchange them for the US dollars and take them away. So with the foreign exchange market, the supply of euros has increased. And with the supply of euros increasing, the euro has now fallen in value. So it's depreciated. So causes and exchange rates. In the real world, there's numerous ongoing changes in demand and supply of a currency, causing exchange rates of most currencies around the world to fluctuate on a daily and even an hourly basis. So here's one example of why. Interest rate changes and financial capital flows. The higher the rate of real interest, after taking inflation into account, the more attractive the financial investments are in the country. So they also have to be higher than the rest of the world. So the scenario is that the real interest rates in Canada are higher relative to the rest of the world. So what happens to financial capital flows into Canada? Well, they're going to go up. People are going to want to invest in Canadian banks. But to do that, they have to buy Canadian dollars in the foreign exchange market. So what happens to the demand for Canadian dollars? It goes up. What happens to the value of the Canadian dollar? It appreciates because the demand curve for the Canadian dollar has shifted right. What if the real interest rates in Canada are lower relative to the rest of the world? Well, what's going to happen is that Canadians are going to take their Canadian dollars, go out into the foreign exchange market, exchange it for some foreign currency so that they can put their money, their hard-earned money, into banks elsewhere in the world. So what happens to financial capital flows out of Canada? They increase. What happens to the supply of the Canadian dollar? It increases in the foreign exchange market because people are bringing money, plunking it down, and taking away foreign currency. And so if the supply of Canadian dollars increases, we know that the value of the Canadian dollar will decrease or depreciate. And so actually, just on a sideline, this really starts to complicate monetary policy, because if you have the central bank trying to reach different objectives, such as dealing with unemployment and inflation, and they decide to use a demand-side policy and change interest rates, they have to realize that it's going to have ramifications on the value of the Canadian dollar, which then ultimately, as you will see, and we've touched upon now, will impact imports and exports. Relative rates of inflation. If Sweden experiences inflation such that its price level rises more rapidly than other countries, then the demand for its exports will fall as other countries now find them too expensive. At the same time, imports to Sweden increases due to imports being cheaper. So what happens to the demand for the Swedish kroner? Well, people are not demanding Swedish exports as much. So the demand is going to decrease. And what's going to happen to the supply of the kroner? Well, if Sweden wants to buy more imports because they're cheaper relative to their own goods, which are experiencing inflation, the people of Sweden will take their kroner, deliver it to the foreign exchange market, leave it there, and exchange it for foreign exchange. So the supply of the kroner will increase. In both cases, when the demand for the kroner decreases and the supply of the kroner increases, the value of the kroner will go down or depreciate. Changes in income. So let's say if income levels in India increase relative to other countries. The Indian residents, so typically if you are wealthy, people want to import more goods. So the Indian residents will demand more imports from other countries. So what will happen to the supply of rupees as citizens exchange it for other currencies? So the citizens of India will take their rupees, take them to the foreign exchange market, leave them there, and the supply of rupees will go up. If the supply of rupees increases, what happens to the value of the rupees? Goes down or depreciates. Changes in taste. Changes in taste may affect the volume and composition of imports and exports, which impacts on exchange rates. So let's say that Japan's exports become more popular due to a change in taste. What will happen for the demand for the yen? Well, people will want to buy Japanese exports, so they'll take their currency, deposit it in the foreign exchange market, and buy up yen. So the demand for the yen will increase. What happens to the value of the yen? It will appreciate. Goes up. Speculation. This is a big one that really affects the value of currency. So currency speculation involves the buying and selling of currencies in order to make a profit on exchange rates. Buying and selling is based on expectations of changes in the value of a currency in the future. So let's say that currency speculators expect the value of the euro will likely appreciate. What will happen to the demand for euros? Well, it will go up because people will be buying it now. What happens to the value of the euro? It will increase or appreciate. And what's interesting is that enough people are doing this, it's a form of self-fulfilling prophecy because the speculators thought it would go up, they buy more, and they drive it up because of that belief. And the opposite happens too. If speculators expect the value of the euro will likely depreciate, they're going to take the euro, bring it onto the foreign exchange market and leave it there to exchange it for other currencies. They want to get rid of the euro. So the supply of the euro in the foreign exchange market goes up, and what happens to the value of the currency of the euro? Goes down or depreciates. Again, like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what affects the demand for a currency? Well, if people want to buy more exports of that particular country, invest more in that country, and if they speculate that the currency will be worth more or that the currency will appreciate, they will buy more of it. What affects supply for a currency? Well, if you're buying more imports, because then you're taking your own currency, leaving it in the foreign exchange market to buy up the foreign currency, and as you leave your own currency, it's affecting the supply or increasing the supply. Um, If there is speculation that the currency will depreciate, and people will want to dump that currency on the foreign exchange market and buy up other currencies. And let me see what else. And so if you're investing more in foreign countries, then again, you'll have to take your own currency, bring it out onto the foreign exchange market, leave it there, affecting the supply, to buy up the foreign currency to invest. And let me just put etc. on both, because there are more reasons than that, of course. Oh, and another one, you are investing more, that would include bank accounts. So let's look at some testers. Eurozone countries buy more imports. Well, if they buy more imports, they have to exchange, and we're tracking, it's important to know what we're tracking euros. So European citizens will have to take their euros, put them out onto the foreign exchange market to buy up other currencies. So in this case, we will have an increase, sorry for the colors, hope that's not too confusing. We'll have an increase of euros, and the currency will depreciate. Real interest rates are higher. U.S. real interest rates are higher than in the rest of the world, and we're tracking quantity of dollars. Okay, if real interest rates are higher than the rest of the world, then there's going to be more of a demand for the US dollar. This is D2, because people will want to exchange their currency in the foreign exchange market for US currency. And this will drive the value of US dollars up. Okay, so there will be an assignment on exchange rates to help you consolidate your knowledge. And the impact of the US economy of a depreciating dollar. Well, I'll leave that for you to look at and make your own conclusions, and we'll discuss this in class. And the impact of a strong US dollar, and another aspect, and the Canadian dollar. Okay, so just a question to leave you with. We've seen that a cheaper loonie can help manufacturers with exports, but what might be the impact on manufacturing if a significant portion of their imports are imported? So, with a cheaper loonie, imports are more expensive. And if imports are inputs, then the cost of production will go up. And so SAS will shift left. And so just looking at this, being macro, we're going to use output. We're going to use price level. So if we had AD, SAS1, and we have P1, SAS shifts to the left because of higher input costs. We're going to see that the price level has increased, and we have what's something called import push inflation. And final tester. This is going back a little ways, but in a report released Friday, Porter says the loonie's drop is due to three factors: a sustained fall in oil and other commodities that Canada exports, the rise of the US dollar as its economy recovers, and policies set by the Bank of Canada, such as interest rate cuts, which have impacted lowering the currency. So if we look at the three things, the sustained fall in oil and other commodities. So if we are exporting less, so let's call this one. If we're exporting less, because the price of exports has gone down, then other countries demand our dollar less because they're buying fewer exports, and so the currency depreciates. Let's look at two, the rise of the US dollar. Okay, so if the US dollar goes up, then the Canadian dollar must go down because it's always, US dollar, because it's one currency in terms of the other. So if the other one is appreciating, the other one will depreciate. And third, interest rate cuts. If we have lower interest rates vis-a-vis the rest of the world, people want to invest less in Canada. And so that would mean demand is going to go down, which means that the value of the dollar will go down, but also Canadians might want to invest in other banks around the world, to invest in other countries more. And so to do that, they have to take the supply of the Canadian dollar, go out onto the foreign exchange market, leave their Canadian dollars, and buy up foreign currency. So again, in both cases, would lead to depreciation. Depreciation here and depreciation here. So you know quite a bit about international currency issues now. Thank you.